AskReddit by you, but even better. What's the most terrifying quote you know? The days are long but the years are short. My mom said exactly this, just not in the same words. She says every time she woke up, she can't wait to go back to sleep, which is 12 HRS plus to go. And then suddenly she was holding a baby, her first grandbaby, and she realized that it's been 28 years. It felt like yesterday that she was changing my eldest sister's diaper, yet she can't remember how to change this baby's diaper because it's been so long. 40 pluses of work goes in a blaze. And now as I'm typing this, I realize that she said that 12 years ago because we just celebrated my niece's 12th birthday. Fuck. Society is just 9 missed meals from collapsing. My dad works for the NSA in anti-terrorism and often advocates for humanitarian aid based on this principle. ISIS doesn't get new recruits by preaching some hip new religion. They get recruits by putting food on the table. People who can't take care of their family will kill anyone for basic necessities. Never let a good crisis go to waste. There was a politician who emailed a colleague on or immediately after saying, if you have any skeletons in your closet, announce them now while no one is paying attention. It is a well-known fact that those people who must want to rule people are, ipso facto, those least suited to do it. Anyone who is capable of getting themselves made president should on no account be allowed to do the job. Douglas Adams. Douglas Adams had so many great quotes. The one I quote the most is not terrifying though. Space is big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemists, but that's just peanuts to space. All bleeding stops eventually. Emergency medicine proverb. Air goes in and out, blood goes round and round, and any discrepancy should be addressed immediately. Anyone who has ever looked into the glazed eyes of a soldier dying on the battlefield will think hard before starting a war. Otto von Bismarck. Weirdly, this isn't often true in practice. Since Auschwitz we know what man is capable of, and since Hiroshima we know what is at stake. Viktor Frankl. Can't believe what he endured. Two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying. Arthur C. Clarke. I actually disagree. I think it is far more terrifying to be alone. If you are silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. Zora Neale Hurston. Wow, I hadn't heard this. I love Zora. Blessed is the mind too small for doubt. Rick Priestley. His is how I got scammed. We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be. Kurt Vonnegut. Oh, that reminds me of one of my favorites. We are, largely, who we remember ourselves to be. That's why habits are so hard to break. If we know ourselves to be liars, we expect not to tell the truth. If we think of ourselves as honest, we try harder. I don't know what weapons will be used to fight World War III, but World War IV will be fought with clubs and stones. Albert Einstein. Immediately brings to mind for me a canticle for Leibovitz. Beautiful, often unexpectedly funny story. For instance, the titular canticle is a grocery list that just happened to survive the fallout, but the monks think it's a holy document. How do we convince the upcoming generation that education is the key to success when we are surrounded by poor graduates and rich criminals? Robert Mugabe. This one is great. Someone has to leave first. This is a very old story. There is no other version of this story. Richard Sicken. After 65 years of marriage, my grandparents passed away within 24 hours of each other, neither knowing the other had passed. While it was awful for the family left behind, I think it was the best way for them to go. This is all it takes for people to plunge into insanity. One night alone with themselves and what they fear the most. Thomas Aldehuvelt, Hex. 5 grams in silent darkness is where the rubber really hits the road. Terence McKenna. A child who does not receive warmth from the village will burn it down to feel it. African proverb. Crappy environments are always a lose-lose situation to be in. When education is not liberating, the dream of the oppressed is to become the oppressor. Paulo Freire. Whoever fights with monsters should see to it that he does not become one himself. And when you stare for a long time into an abyss, the abyss stares back into you. Friedrich Nietzsche. The abyss stared back at you long enough. It now speaks, and it does not speak softly. When we're all gone at last, there'll be nobody here but death, and his days will be numbered too. He'll be out in the road there with nothing to do and nobody to do it to. Cormac McCarthy, The Road. Death in every version, as we know, only thrives on taking life, and therefore, he shall disappear with the last life that he takes. He has no days to number. I like your quote, but I believe it only has that kick to it because of the last line. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. H.P. Lovecraft. It gets better. Paraphrased from memory. If all the scientists in the world could come together and categorize their knowledge, the truth would become known, and so appalling, that humanity would flee from its light into the relief of a new dark age. The sadness will last forever. Van Gogh's last words. I hope it's not true. It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness. That is life. I'm not even a Star Trek fan, but this quote hits hard. I wouldn't call it terrifying, but it's definitely one of my favorites. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper. T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot has a lot of banger quotes. You have shown me the sky, but what good is the sky to a creature that will never do better than crawl? Everyone is a moon, and has a dark side which he never shows to anybody. Mark Twain. More accurately today, everyone is a moon, and has a far side which he never shows to those nearest to him, but shows to the rest of the universe. This describes the online disinhibition effect, how people behave anonymously online vs how they behave when they are identifiable. Homer Simpson to Bart. The worst day of your life so far. Weaseling out of things is important to learn. It's what separates us from the animals, except the weasel. Homer Simpson. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors so that, in glory and triumph, they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Carl Sagan. Pale blue dot is one of the most humbling and fascinating things I've ever seen. The image paired with Sagan's writing about it just floods me with emotion every time. One must choose in life between boredom and suffering. Madame de Stael. Her decision was emphatically in favor of suffering, which after all was a pleasure compared to boredom. Good motivation to go to the gym, TBH. When the game is over, the king and pawn are thrown into the same box. Italian. The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. Nietzsche. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely is awesome. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Shadow work.